My sisters grew up with my single mom. I grew up with my single dad and now I know why. My parents have been separated since I can remember, and they had 3 children including me. My 2 older sisters and I are the only boys. My father made me feel loved and he always made sure I knew that. But I never understood why he was so affectionate and loving with me. He got my sisters to visit us every weekend because he still wanted to be there for them. But he never was as affectionate with them as he was with me. Like cuddling, reading bedtime stories, playing with me. That's not what he did with them when they visited us. It was more superficial, but he was still loving them. Unlike most siblings, we actually had a good bond with each other. But for some reason we never visited mom and she also never visited us or asked for my dad to bring me. I was raised like that, practically not knowing my mom at all. I just knew she existed and that my sisters lived with her. I found out why our family was like that when I went to the attic to look for something I thought I might have put there. I found the DVDs where my dad has captured all the big moments of our life. He showed me this DVD a few times. They were 3 DVDs in an old and kind of dusty case. I remembered that every time he showed me these DVDs he was skipping a specific moment on DVD 1. And I was curious why he didn't want to show me that. I was still looking around for what I was looking for but took the DVD with me and watched it. When it got to the scene my dad used to skip, it showed a gender reveal party with my pregnant mom and my father who had these gender reveal smoke bombs in their hand. And when the blue smoke came out my father went off and was happy while my mom's facial expression went from excitement to pure disappointment. I was confused but kept watching. She then threw the smoke bomb away, ran into the house behind them and slammed the door angrily. My father's look turned from excited to worried, and he told the people to stop recording. Then the scene skipped. Now I knew why he didn't want me to see this. I asked about it and I could tell he felt guilty and he told me everything. He said that my mom wanted to have 3 girls and she told him that she will not change her mind. He said they divorced because my mom wanted to set me up for adoption and try for a 3rd girl and my dad didn't want that. She even told him that if her pregnancy wasn't so advanced already she would have thought about aborting me. He told me that he wanted to make sure I don't feel less because my sisters had the privilege of growing up with both parents. That's why he made sure to give me extra attention and to always be there for me. I love my dad but this was still gut-wrenching and a hard pill for me to swallow. He asked if I was fine. I told him I was, but when I got upstairs I was heavily suppressing tears. I couldn't understand why my mom didn't want me. Like it's okay to be disappointed if your child doesn't have the gender you would have wanted, but setting me up for adoption or worse thinking about abortion because it is messed up.
Being vegan means the world to me, so I called my parents murderers and hit my mother for grilling steak. My family has always been big meat eaters. My father hunts sometimes. The traditional big meal was always steak for everyone, myself included. I made a new friend in school who I noticed always had really interesting food at lunch. When I asked her about it, she told me she was vegan and offered me some of her food to try. I really liked it, so she said she would send me the recipe. She emailed it to me, along with some links to information about being vegan and the horrors of the meat industry. I stayed up all night reading and researching stuff about animal cruelty and abuse, and then next morning I told my parents I decided I was going to be a vegan now. They thought I was joking at first, and, once they realized I was serious, my mom laughed and said, "You won't last 2 days as a vegan." But I was really dedicated. I bought vegan cookbooks and started making all my own meals. Since my parents refused to make vegan food for dinner, I spent all my spare time reading horror stories about what happens to animals on meat farms, and I would cry for hours thinking about these poor defenseless creatures who just want to live their lives but get murdered so someone can enjoy a hamburger. I sent some of those articles to my parents to try to get them to see the horrible things they were doing every time they ate meat, but they just told me they didn't want to be guilt-tripped and started deleting them without reading them. I told them they wouldn't feel guilt-tripped unless they had something to feel guilty about, and they had no real comeback for that. They just told me I needed to stop. My dad's birthday was coming up and he always grills steak kebabs for it because they're his favorite food. I told them that I would not be participating and that my dad and I would have to celebrate his birthday on another day at a vegan restaurant. I planned to just lock myself in my room during dinner and pretend it wasn't happening, but even with my windows closed I could smell the kebabs cooking and I couldn't stop thinking about the poor cows that had to die so my parents could have dinner. I knew I had to say something to them, so I went out to the backyard where they were grilling, but once I could see the kebabs I started crying and I couldn't stop. My mom came over and hugged me, and I thought she was just there to comfort me, but then she said, "You're ruining your dad's birthday. You need to stop," in my ear. I was so upset and betrayed that I shoved her away from me, but I guess I pushed her too hard because she fell all the way to the ground. I started to help her up, but before I could my dad came over and asked me what the hell I'd done to my mother, and I started screaming back that none of this would be happening if they weren't murdering animals right in front of me. My mother started crying and said she couldn't take it anymore, and my dad brought me inside and laid into me, telling me I was making everyone miserable and they dreaded seeing me every day because all I did was talk to them about animal abuse, and that all he wanted was one day of peace to enjoy his birthday and I couldn't even give them that. I told him, I don't think murder should be acceptable on anyone's birthday, and he told me to go to my room while he figured out what to do to me. I went up to my room. At first I was fuming, but I kept thinking about how shocked my mother had looked when I shoved her, and I started feeling really bad. When my parents came up, I apologized for pushing my mother. My dad said he was sorry for yelling. We all agreed that things had gotten way too heated. My parents hugged me and they told me they would make an effort to make vegetarian meals more often. I decided I could compromise and eat vegetarian with them as long as I live under their roof and go back to being a full vegan once I live on my own. But it's been a few months now and honestly I'm thinking I might just stay vegetarian. It's so much easier.